A'ja Wilson has just been named Magazine's 2025. On paper, this should have been a pure celebration. A dominant season, a fourth MVP, another title run, and the spotlight squarely on her. But instead of simply taking the win, Wilson used the moment to make a pointed comment that many fans saw as a direct shot at Caitlin Clark. Time Athlete of the Year. In her Time feature, Wilson said that the history of the WNBA was erased for a minute. To some readers, it sounded like a thoughtful reflection on how media narratives overlook the league's past. But to a huge portion of the basketball world, the timing and framing were crystal clear. This was about Caitlin Clark and the way her explosive rookie year shifted the conversation toward one player. What makes it even more controversial is the context. Just a year earlier, when Clark was the one named Time's 2024 Athlete of the Year, Wilson and others publicly questioned why a single player, especially a white rookie, was being elevated above the rest of the league. Wilson strongly implied that race was part of the reason Clark was getting so much attention. Now, in 2025, Wilson is the sole face on the same magazine's cover, celebrated individually, without calling for anyone else to be included. Fans are asking a simple question: if it was a race thing and disrespectful to the league when Clark was the solo face of a Time cover, why is it suddenly acceptable when Wilson is? And that's where Caitlin Clark finally stepped in. But before we get to how Clark responded, let me know in the comments. Do you think A'ja deserves the award? And does the way she used her platform sit right with you? What Wilson meant by history was erased. Let's unpack what Wilson said and why it hit such a nerve. In the Time interview, when she claimed WNBA history was erased for a minute, she didn't name Clark, but the timeline makes her target obvious to most observers. The comment lines up almost perfectly with Clark's rookie season, when interest in the league skyrocketed. In 2024, Caitlin Clark shattered attendance records, drove the highest TV ratings the WNBA had seen in years, led the Indiana Fever back to the playoffs for the first time since 2016, became the global face of women's basketball, was named Time's 2024 Athlete of the Year. All of that happened in one season. Wilson's claim that history was erased sounded to many like a complaint that the storyline shifted too quickly from the veterans and longtime stars, many of them black women, to a new white rookie. To some, that's a fair concern about how media works. To others, it sounded less like critique of media systems and more like a personal jab carefully timed for maximum impact. What stood out even more was what Wilson did not say throughout 2024. While Clark was breaking records, filling arenas, taking violent hits, dealing with flagrant fouls and even threats, Wilson never made any strong public statement defending her, supporting her, or even acknowledging what she was doing for the league. She didn't have to praise Clark, but her silence, combined with later criticism, painted a clear picture for many fans. This wasn't just about history, it was about resentment. Wilson now frames her stance as protecting the integrity of the WNBA and honoring its pioneers. But the fact that she waited until her own biggest media moment to bring this up and framed it in a way that subtly minimized Clark's impact made it feel calculated rather than purely principled. The double standard around recognition. To really see the hypocrisy that fans are calling out, you have to compare how individual recognition was handled for Clark versus Wilson. In 2024, when Time chose Caitlin Clark as Athlete of the Year, several prominent voices around the WNBA complained. Some said the entire WNBA should have been on the cover. Others strongly suggested that honoring Clark alone was an insult to the black players who had built the league long before her. Wilson herself leaned into this narrative, hinting that Clark's race contributed to her outsized attention and mainstream celebration. The message was, it's wrong for media to treat Clark like she's the only one that matters. Fast forward to 2025. A'ja Wilson is now on the Time cover, alone, as their Athlete of the Year. Where are the calls for a group cover now? Where are the "what about the rest of the league" arguments? Where is the "this should be about all of us" energy? Suddenly, the same people who framed Clark's solo recognition as divisive and unfair are quiet when Wilson gets the exact same individual spotlight. No one is standing up on TV saying the entire WNBA should be on this cover, not just A'ja. No one is questioning whether it's a problem that Wilson is being presented as the face of the league. That's why so many fans are calling this out as a blatant double standard. It starts to look less like a principled stance on collective recognition and more like a weapon that gets pulled out only when Caitlin Clark is the one being celebrated. The narrative Wilson chose to push. The Time profile on Wilson didn't just celebrate her achievements, it also helped amplify a particular narrative about Clark. The piece described Clark's rise as feeding into a toxic and racially divisive storyline, framing Wilson as someone trying to protect a league built largely by black players from being flattened into a Clark-only phenomenon. Of course, there's a real conversation to be had about how media sometimes erases the history and contributions of black women. That's valid. But the way this conversation is being used, in Wilson's biggest feature, right as she's finally getting the recognition she wanted, feels less like a nuanced critique of media and more like a personal and targeted reframing of Clark's impact. Wilson has built a public persona around sisterhood, unity, and growing the game together. She talks about women supporting women and lifting each other up. But the timing, tone, and focus of her comments about Clark tell a different story to a lot of fans. Instead of saying, "What Caitlin is doing is incredible and it builds on everything we've worked for," Wilson chose repeatedly to emphasize how the focus on Clark supposedly erased what came before. It doesn't sound like someone excited about the sport's growth. It sounds like someone who feels displaced by it. The power shift Wilson can feel. Underneath all of this is a very simple reality. The power dynamics in women's basketball are changing. Clark's impact isn't theoretical, it's measurable. TV ratings for games she plays in go through the roof. Tickets sell out in markets that used to ignore the WNBA completely. Her jerseys and merch break sales records. She's landing massive multi-year endorsement deals. She's headlining mainstream campaigns and brands far beyond basketball. Brands, networks, and international organizers clearly view her as the single most valuable growth engine the sport has right now. That doesn't erase what Wilson has accomplished, but it does shift where the spotlight is pointed. For years, A'ja Wilson was treated as the face of the WNBA, multiple MVPs championships, a super team, media love, all deserved. But in one rookie season, Clark did what almost no one has ever done. She changed the scale of the conversation. When that happens, it's human to feel threatened. But what separates a secure leader from an insecure one is how they respond. Wilson has now given us a pattern. Silent during Clark's rise. Speaking only when she can cast doubt on Clark's recognition. Bringing race and erasure into the conversation only when the spotlight is on Clark. Then happily accepting the very kind of solo, individual recognition she previously framed as problematic. That's why a lot of fans interpret this less as speaking truth to power, and more as someone struggling to accept that the center of gravity has shifted. How Caitlin Clark responded. After the Time interview with Wilson started circulating and fans dissected every quote, every line about history and erasure, the basketball world waited to see what Caitlin Clark would say, if anything. She had every reason to clap back. She could have called out the hypocrisy directly, that Wilson only seems to care about shared recognition when Clark is the one being singled out. She could have pointed out that Wilson stayed silent while she was getting hammered on the court and booed in hostile arenas, only to later complain about her attention. She could have used her own platform to publicly defend herself and expose the double standard. Instead, Caitlin Clark did something completely different. She went on Instagram and posted a simple, genuine message congratulating A'ja Wilson on being named Time Magazine's 2025 Athlete of the Year. No sarcasm, no coded language, no buried subtweets. Just congratulations. She praised Wilson's season. She acknowledged the greatness of her accomplishments. She celebrated another woman in basketball getting a massive look from one of the biggest publications in the world. That was it. No drama, no retaliation, no effort to turn the spotlight back on herself. And in doing so, Clark made Wilson's approach look even smaller by comparison. Two different approaches, two different futures. When you put it side by side, the contrast is brutal. A'ja Wilson used her biggest media moment to push a narrative that implicitly diminished Caitlin Clark's impact and framed her as a threat to history. Caitlin Clark used her response to congratulate Wilson on that same honor and amplify her success. Wilson's interview focused on what she felt was taken away from her and her era. Clark's post focused on what another woman had earned. Wilson treated Clark's attention as something that needed to be explained, corrected, and balanced. Clark treated Wilson's recognition as something that deserved celebration. And that's exactly why so many fans and sponsors keep gravitating toward Clark. She doesn't just put up numbers. She brings an energy that feels expansive, not threatened. She doesn't need to tear down other players to lift herself up. She doesn't frame women's success in the league as a zero-sum game. Clark understands something simple but powerful. The WNBA grows when more players win, not fewer. Wilson, at least in how she's chosen to handle Clark's rise publicly, still seems stuck in the mindset that every spotlight is a fight over who deserves it more. The truth is, both can be great. Both can be icons. Both can be historic. But only one of them is acting like the future. So now I want to hear from you. Do you think Aja Wilson deserved Time's 2025 Athlete of the Year? Do you think her comments about history being erased were fair? Or were they a jealous swipe at Caitlin Clark dressed up as theory about legacy? And what do you think of Clark's response? Taking the high road and congratulating Aja publicly? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like the video, subscribe, and turn on all notifications so you never miss what's next in this unfolding rivalry. Because this isn't just about two players. It's about what kind of leadership will define the next era of women's basketball.